let's go in here. So let's say we've got two objects here. We'll do a cube and a sphere. Now, we've talked a lot on this stream about ways of connecting objects. Typically, we talk about grouping and we talk about constraints. But there are many other ways of connecting things in Maya so that objects move together. Now, one of them is right here under mesh, you have combine, and then you also have, let's see, there is a connect option right here, connect, under edit mesh. So what do these do? Well, they all just connect things in different ways. So let's actually start with grouping. So what grouping does is it is a hierarchy connection. Basically, it takes two objects and places them into a group underneath a new group. It's, if you've used Photoshop or something like that, it's like adding a layer and then putting objects in that layer, or a group folder, I should say. So I'll take these two objects, hit Control G to group, or you can go to Edit, Group right here. And right there, we've got a group, and underneath are both objects. What this allows us to do is move each individual object on their own, or I can select the group and it moves them both together. As animators, this works pretty well in lots of cases as long as we don't want the object to be let go, because once they're in this group, that's it, they are connected in this way. The next thing we have are constraints. This creates basically a connection between two objects. So if I select these here, we'll go to animation, constrain, and we'll just do a parent constraint. Do this, and you'll see the attributes turn blue there, and we get a new node right here. So it adds this new connection, and basically this connection is just going, okay, sphere, your attributes now are connected to these attributes for the cube, which means that when I move the cube, the sphere moves along, and the sphere is locked into place there. It cannot move on its own. The nice thing with a constraint is that you can turn it on and off. So if I needed to, I could turn the constraint off there, and now it goes through and they are both separate. There we go. You'll see it doesn't follow. If I turn this back on, whoop, now it follows. Okay, so that's the two main ways. But now we have, let's go to our modeling tool set. We have mesh combine. What this is going to do is take two meshes. So we've got the P sphere, the polygon cube, and the polygon sphere. And then we can combine them into a new object. So it's going to be called P sphere 2 because it was the last object we had selected. But I could just call this combined. And now it acts as if it's one object. You'll notice that we do get these weird groups just sitting there. That's the transform history. So in Maya, everything has a history to it, which basically means that I can make modifications to certain things and kind of re-update them. If I want to get rid of that history, I can go to Edit, Delete by Type History, and now you'll see we have one object that is technically these two combined. Even though visually we see two separate objects, to Maya it is one single object. Now, if we have connect, let's undo. Let's do this. So we'll go to Edit Mesh, Connect. And you'll notice that, well, it didn't do anything. The reason for that is connect is, I believe, I don't usually use it too often. I believe it connects different different components. So I'm going to just test this here. If I take edge to edge here, connect. No. See. I don't usually use the, there you go. So what it's going to do is allow us to add segments onto a face. So it actually doesn't connect objects. It adds connections between two components. So vertices, edges, faces. So by doing this, I can connect these two edges right there, like so. So that's what the connect tool does, is it adds extra detail in there. It is not a tool to combine objects. Yeah, it's modeling, not animated related. For animation specifically, we almost exclusively use constraints, parenting, and grouping, which technically parenting and grouping are the same thing, is just putting things into a hierarchy. Parenting, you're placing one object into the hierarchy of another object. Grouping, you're placing two objects or multiple objects into a group node, which is just kind of an empty folder, if you think about it that way. Let's see, there's a few other ways we can connect objects. One of them is we can actually connect attributes. So if we want things to follow each other exactly. So let's say we've got this. I'm going to modify freeze transformations. This resets their values to 0 and kind of resets them to a new default position right here. And if I wanted to, I can connect these so that the values of one, let's say the values of the cube, equal the value of the sphere. To do this, you can go into Windows, General Editors, Connection Editor, and we just need to load in our objects. So the way this connects is it's going to connect from the left to the right. You can see it with this button right here. So the left one in this case is going to be the thing that leads. So let's say that's the cube. We'll select that and reload left. Select the sphere, reload right. And then I just need to find what I want to connect. So I could say the translation attributes. So where is that here? So the cube's translates will connect to the sphere's translates. And you can see that the sphere has these yellow connections now. These are connections. It's similar to a constraint, but a constraint has like an extra node and is connecting them in a very specific way. This is basically a direct connection. One equals the other. Now if I move the cube, the sphere moves just like that. There you go. Now the cool thing with connections is that they don't have to go from translate to translate, rotate to rotate. I could have it so that the translate connects into the rotate attribute. And let's actually do this the other way. Well, actually, no, this will work as long as I go wireframe on shaded so we can see. Now, if I take this, you can see that as I translate the cube, it's rotating the sphere. So the translate X is connected to the rotate X. The translate Z is connected to the rotate Z, just like that. We could even set it up to be connected to the scale. So as it moves, we're scaling the sphere. So connections are very powerful. You can do all sorts of really cool things in there. And then from there, this is going a little extra and beyond, but if ever you're interested in stuff like this, you can go to the node editor. So I went to Windows, node editor, and then let's graph this out. And we can see here, this is our connection right there. So the translate is being brought into the rotation and is converting the units. This is a typical node that comes in when you're going from one set of attributes to another. It's a unit conversion. It's totally normal. And basically our translates are being pumped into there. Now, if you want to get even more complicated, you can add extra things. So I could add a multiply node in here. So I just hit tab and I'm going to do a multiply divide. And let's take our translate X and we're going to bring it into our inputs of the multiply divide right there. So translate X is going to the input X, Y, and Z. Now input 2 right here, you can actually see it right there. This is the number that's going to be multiplied by. So you can see that this is our input 1, the translations. Input 2, the value it's going to be multiplied by. So let's say we'll multiply it by 5. Now we'll take our output and connect that into the rotation. Right there. Now you'll notice it's not doing anything. Why? We need that unit conversion. So I'm going to put it in there instead. So output into there, and then it's doing the unit conversion right into the sphere. Now, when we move this, that rotation is even more. Let's go back to our multiply divide here. Let's set that to 20. Now, any little motion I make, you can see how that sphere is really going crazy. So we can do all sorts of things with connections and kind of build in this even more powerful movement and kind of network. And this is just with one node. You can have so many different nodes in here. You can set it so that it's based on camera angles. You can set it so that it's based on the position on screen. There's all sorts of cool things you can do. So yeah, that's the main ways that you can connect. As animators, almost exclusively we will use parenting and constraining, sometimes grouping. The other elements tend to come in more towards rigging or making complex networks, which we can still do as animators, but our day-to-day doesn't usually involve that. Let's see, I've never used the connection editor, only set-driven keys. So yeah, that's the other way you can make connections. So the set-driven key is going to do a similar thing, but it is animation-based. So it's basically an if-and situation. If the translate X value equals a certain amount, the sphere value equals a certain amount. If the visibility is on, then something else happens. And that's a really great way to connect objects. You can find this under animation, key, set-driven key right there. So for example, let me open up a scene here, actually. Is this it? Yeah. So I was modeling a rigging a skateboard for a student at Animation Mentor. I had done a skateboard prop a while back. Some of you might have seen me doing this on stream. So I had done this skateboard, and I just created a very simple rig for it. So we've got a root control here. You can move it around. You've got a movement control there. Done. Haha. But I've also set up a more complex network. So for example, we have the high res control right here. The high res, if you look at let's do shading wireframe on shaded. If you look at the amount of detail right now, you can see that the skateboard is pretty low res. If I take this, I can set this to on and look at how much more detail we have here. Suddenly a lot more detail. Now, how did that happen? How did I set that up? Well, basically I created a new attribute here by selecting the control ring here, going to modify, add attribute right there. And I added an on-off attribute. Then, if you look at the rig here, we have a regular geometry and a high-res geometry group. So there's two different sets of geometry. And what I did was I used set-driven key to make it so that when the high-res geometry is off, the regular geometry visibility is on, the high-res is off. When high-res right here is turned on, it will turn off the visibility of the skateboard geo and turn on the high-res geo. So it's basically doing this if-and thing. And it's very powerful. And you can see the attributes are blue when they are this kind of dark blue when it's a set-driven key. And you can do this for all sorts of things. So for example, here I added extra hidden controls. So we've got a gimbal control right in there, individual wheel controls. We've got tilt control, so I can just take this and add a little tilt to the skateboard or even to the trucks if I need to. So we've got all sorts of different ways we can build this. And this was using the connection editor. So for example, the connection editor, basically I have this attribute right here, which just connects to the rotations of the wheels. And I get this 1-to-1 rotation. Or I can use these and rotate that as well. And I just use the connection editor. The rotations of this control equals the rotations of the wheel. The set driven key is for all of the switches. And when is weight painting needed? Weight painting is needed when you are skinning something. So connecting the geometry to a skeleton. And basically weight painting is used to determine how much the skin is going to follow each joint. And it's a very complex thing. It takes a lot of practice to get good weight painting. I'm not very good at it. I've never been very good at it. But it is a very useful skill. Like to make a good rig, you need to good organic rig, you need good weights.